All right. Can everyone hear me okay? If you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. All right, thank you. So I'm Nick. I'm on the Evmos team, and I'm here today to talk to you about how Evmos brings Ethereum smart contracts to the Cosmos ecosystem. So for those of you who don't know, a little bit about Evmos. Evmos stands for, it's a portmanteau of EVM plus Cosmos. And it basically combines the best of both worlds. It brings programmability and composability from the EVM to the Cosmos ecosystem, which is known for its sovereignty and interoperability. And the way things are implemented on the low level is that Cosmos SDK lets you build modules that you can compose together to build your own L1. And the EVM here is built in the form of a module, in the form of a Cosmos SDK module, which lets L1 builders extend their chain, whatever chain that may be, by adding an EVM to it. So that lets that lets developers deploy any Ethereum dApps that work on other EVM chains to a Cosmos SDK chain, right? But the current Evmos team in 2022 is by no means the first team that sort of thought up this idea. A little bit of a history lesson here. Ethermint has been a long-running idea in the Cosmos community. Ethermint, of course, being portmanteau of Ethereum and Tendermint. Ethermint was initially proposed as a Cosmos zone that would combine native Cosmos functionality with Ethereum smart contracts. And this was proposed way back in like 2016-17. And on the right, you can actually see a talk that Chris Goes gave back in 2018 on Ethermint 2.0, right? Which again is Cosmos plus EVM. So we were talking about Ethermint 2.0, not even the first version, all the way back in 2018. Several teams in the past have tried to launch this Ethermint idea as its own chain, and it's only this year that the Evmos team was able to launch the Ethermint idea as Evmos. And I'll talk a little bit about how the Ethermint idea evolved into Evmos. But sort of the core thing that attracted so many previous teams to build out the Ethermint idea was the fact that you could offer developers the same Ethereum environment that they were used to. So, you know, working with things like MetaMask, Truffle.js, Hardhat, Foundry, Remix, all the tools that they knew and loved, but with features from the Cosmos world like proof of stake, Tendermint fast finality, and Cosmos's on-chain governance, which is super underrated at this point in time. Right? Oh, I just realized it's not full screen. How do we make it full screen? Oh, there you go. That's a bit better. So I was talking about how attractive the idea of Ethermint is, and it's not just an attraction from the Cosmos side. It's not just folks like Chris Goes who've been in the Cosmos community for a long time who've been talking about Ethermint, but folks from the Ethereum side as well have also sort of sought after this idea of a fast finality chain for Ethereum. So you can see here tweets by Vitalik Buterin and Martin Kopelman, and even our very own Sunny from Osmosis, talking about a future where Ethereum leverages fast finality, fast single slot finality, and there have been other materials, you know, talking about how Ethereum wants to you know, implement the merge and bring proof of stake to Ethereum. So really, the Ethereum folks are talking about how they want to be a Cosmos chain without really saying that part out loud, right? Cosmos chains, of course, deriving a lot of their properties from the consensus engine Tendermint that they use. So that's where single slot fast finality comes from, right? So we talked about Ethermint. So when did Ethermint become Evmos? Right. Last year. When we were building out the Ethermint idea after it had been abandoned by the last team, we realized that the EVM space had come a long way since the Ethermint idea was first proposed. Back when Ethermint was first proposed, there was just a single EVM, Ethereum. Since then, other chains like Polygon, Optimism, Avalanche have all launched and sort of use their own unique stacks to a large degree, right? And so we realized that the vanilla Ethermint approach didn't actually add that much value on top of the EVM chains that were already out there. So what we decided to do is to build Ethermint into a library module that anyone out there could use for their own L1. What this means is if you're an L1 builder building with the Cosmos SDK and would like to enable Ethereum smart contracts for your chain, you can just plug and chug the EVM module in the form of Ethermint into your L1, right? Giving your L1 an EVM runtime out of the box, right? So Evmos comes as a flagship representation, basically a proof of concept for the Ethermint library, and both are open source. And we've seen the community actually fork both in recent months, which further demonstrates the validity of the core thesis that we had initially, that Ethermint would be most useful as an open source tool for others to incorporate into their L1s. And you've heard of many of these chains. There are chains like Kronos, Kava, OKX chain, Kanto, and these are all chains that use Ethermint. So Kava's EVM cochain runs on Ethermint. Kanto is a fork of Evmos with a few of the Evmos specific modules torn out. Kronos implements an early version of Ethermint. And you know, was able to launch actually before Evmos even went live, because we were working on Ethermint at the time, and they contributed to the repo. What's also interesting about Evmos is that it takes a community-driven approach. So Evmos got its start in early 2021 when my co-founder, Federico, wrote up proposal number 44 to the Cosmos Hub. So proposal number 44 requested a grant of 100K Atom in order to build out Ethermint. And it was still called Ethermint at the time when Federico made this initial proposal. The community knew that Ethermint was an idea that had been long coveted by the Cosmos community, and so they voted to fund this proposal. And it's, to this day, I think Evmos is one of the few L1s that was funded entirely by a community. So, you know, no private interests, no VCs, just the community launching a chain. You know, other examples of this since then have been chains like Juno, and I think Neutron is the latest exciting chain that will be coming to the Cosmos. I think it's Neutron. As a result of this community-driven approach, we, the Evmos team, decided to grant the community 60% of the initial token allocation, with 40% going into the strategic reserve for Evmos to ensure its continuity and longevity. Right. The spirit of the community-driven approach that was kicked off back in early 2021 has continued long into Evmos' lifespan, with things like major events, projects, and incentives being entirely planned by and funded by the Evmos community without necessarily the involvement of the core team, which allows the core team to focus on the engineering side when dedicated community members can push other initiatives forward. Right, which is very, I think, in the spirit of what the Cosmos ecosystem is all about. Huge example is this very event was sponsored by the Evmos community pool. The core team had very little to do with that decision. The Evmos, besides, in fact, just being here and talking on this stage. So yeah, props and shout outs to the Evmos community. Now, a little bit about what Evmos tries to do as an extension of the original Ethermint idea, right? When we were building on Cosmos in the early days, again, my co-founder Federico was one of the folks who worked on the core IBC repo as well as the Cosmos SDK repo early on. We realized that Cosmos was facing somewhat of an existential issue, and this is back in 2021, remember. Electric Capital put out a report, maybe you've seen the chart in the top right, of the number of developers who are building in Cosmos compared to other ecosystems like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, etc. Right? The number of EVM developers out there far outnumbered the number of Cosmos developers by an order of magnitude. Now keep in mind, this report isn't entirely perfect. It only, leverages data from repos that are open source. And so I'm sure there are closed source repos out there where there are, Cosmos developers are building in private. However, the point still stands that there are way more EVM developers out there than both Cosmos SDK developers and CosmWasm developers as well. And that makes sense, right? Building L1s is way harder than building dApps. You have the additional friction of having to bootstrap a validator set from scratch as well. So the idea here was to bring the EVM to the Cosmos so that EVM developers could just leverage, as I mentioned earlier, could just leverage all of the tools they were familiar with in order to accelerate development on Cosmos. And I'll talk a little bit about what the trajectory might look like for developers who start off building a dApp on top of Evmos, who will later then evolve that dApp idea into its own chain. Recently, DYDX launched their own Cosmos chain in sort of a similar trajectory as what I'll describe. And so that's a very exciting sort of validating case study for this thesis. Right. So in summary, if we were to summarize the idea of Evmos and why we chose to launch it in the first place, beyond just making Ethermint as a library, as a module, just open source, was that we see Evmos as the point of entry for liquidity and developer mindshare into the Cosmos ecosystem. Right. As we mentioned, Evmos is built by the community, driven by the community, but built for developers. The fact of the matter is that Evmos moves incredibly fast at a breakneck pace. It's only been live for about 2 to 3 months at this point, and we're already on version 6 of the Evmos software. And we'll be launching version 7 fairly soon. This means that developers can make requests to the core team as far as the features they want to see, the things that would help out their development the most, and the core team can work towards incorporating those features in a turnaround time of months as opposed to years. Again, I keep mentioning that all of the tools that work with Ethereum and other EVM chains will generally work with Evmos out of the box with very little additional that's needed on the developer side. So things like explorers, wallets like MetaMask, UIs, dApps can be ported over to Evmos, again, with very little changes to the code. The last piece here is that Evmos enables certain features that no other EVM allows their developers to leverage. So I'm talking about interchain dApps. dApps that can talk to other chains directly without the need of a bespoke bridge. Right? And this is not just for token transfers, but also arbitrary function calls. All right. There's this idea brewing amongst the Evmos core team of a dApp store. And I'll talk a little bit about the dApp store idea more when I'm talking about incentive misalignment. But essentially, the future of Evmos is one that's incredibly consumer-facing with discoverability, searchability, and general legibility tooling for developers to bring attention to their dApp to new audiences, from new audiences. And again, I'll be talking about what the dApp store experience actually is. So we also mentioned that Evmos is a port city for liquidity as well. As a developer, what you're able to do when building on Evmos is gain access to two ecosystems. One is obviously Ethereum and all of the liquidity and tokens available through Ethereum. And Evmos, again, can be bridged both to Ethereum and to the Cosmos ecosystem over IBC. And so what you essentially are able to do is get access to tokens on both sides of the ecosystem. And not just that, for every new chain that launches in the Cosmos ecosystem, Evmos developers gain access to those audiences as well, again, over IBC. And this comes for free with no additional work that's required on the part of any of the dApp developers building on top of Evmos. ERC20s from Ethereum can work seamlessly with Cosmos chains, and likewise Cosmos chains can be transferred over to Ethereum through Evmos seamlessly again, over bridges like Nomad and Connext. And again, the interoperability piece allows users to manipulate balances on other Cosmos chains directly from Evmos. That small idea lets developers build out sort of a new axis for UIs, what we call next generation UX. One example of how Evmos accomplishes this is allowing users to use MetaMask to not have to switch the tooling they're used to. So Evmos caters to audiences both in the Cosmos and Ethereum communities, and support for things like voting on on-chain governance, staking on Cosmos through this Cosmos staking module, are both supported over MetaMask, which, as far as I'm aware, is one of the few times where MetaMask can sign payloads for the Cosmos ecosystem directly, right? On the flip side, we're working with the Kepler team to have Kepler, which is, as you know, one of the biggest Cosmos-focused wallets. We're working with the Kepler team to enable EVM signing through Kepler, which means that, again, once both wallets, MetaMask and Kepler, and all of the Wallet Connect wallets as well, once all of those have parity, it shouldn't matter what users are used to using, anything will work on Evmos. Let's talk about one of the challenges that Ethereum developers face when building for a multi-chain environment. When building for a multi-chain environment, so taking the example of Aave here, when building for a multi-chain environment, Aave is able to deploy their smart contracts on multiple EVM chains, right, without needing to change much about them. And this is sort of what's done usually. New Aave deployments are approved by Aave governance and are deployed to whatever new chain is out there. And so that's where TVL will coalesce, as well as the user base there. However, if we're shooting for a future that surpasses the Web 2 experience, we really need to start thinking not on the L1 level, but on the dApp level. It shouldn't matter to the end user what infrastructure their dApp lives on. It's not as if in today's world the user has to think about whether the app they're using is built on top of AWS or Google Cloud. In a similar vein, we want to make sure that the user isn't thinking about what L1 the dApp they're using is built on top of, right? On the developer side, the pain point comes in the form of the fact that every dApp needs to track every deployment that they make. They need to manage those and upgrade them individually. if there's a bug in one contract that's found, every contract needs to go through an upgrade process, which is tedious and cumbersome. What Evmos enables is, instead of a multi-chain deployment strategy, we like to opt for an interchain deployment strategy, where single deployment is sufficient and enabled to talk to other chains. So if Aave wanted to, they could deploy on Evmos, and through Evmos, have their users talk to and manipulate their balances, assets, tokens, etc. on other chains. Right? We see this approach as much more scalable in general. Again, this is what we call interchain composability. Deploy once, connect everywhere. Again, focusing, circling back to the user pain points, interchain accounts, which is a feature in the Cosmos ecosystem, means that users will no longer need to switch between networks, right? Again, trying to enable that vision of having the user not need to care about what chain they're using, only what app they're interfacing with at that moment in time, right? The interchain accounts experience enables transactions to be fired from a single chain with a single user address. The user will never need to switch between networks because, again, they shouldn't have to. We haven't seen this much yet, but once interchain accounts is adopted more broadly in the Cosmos ecosystem, we'll see massive shifts in how UI is built and thought about amongst developers, as well as a paradigm shift in user behavior, demanding not to have to switch networks every time they need to manipulate a balance on a different chain, right? Ideally, again, they should only have to use one address, one private key, right, to sign for any balance on any other chain out there, right? And Evmos is just a small part of that puzzle, but we're trying to make interchain accounts, you know, the paradigm shift of the future. So I mentioned the dApp store, and part of the idea that seeded the dApp store was the fact that we saw a misalignment in incentives for those stakeholders both building and using blockchain networks. So, as we all know, EVM chains, much like any chains out there, are formed by multiple stakeholders, multiple community members, and different demographics, different user segments, right? Examples of this are folks like miners who have very different needs and incentives to run chain software than users do, or than developers do, right? However, only miners were really incentivized in the past to bring value to the ecosystem. So for all of their work, developers and users have been traditionally left out of this value accrual mechanism. So we asked the question, how can we align dApp devs and end users as well as miners who reap rewards from things like transaction fees and block rewards, all right? And yeah, so if you read our token model blog post that we put out, what was it, I think in December of last year, you'll see that there's a strong focus on the three key stakeholders that I've mentioned so far: validators, developers, and users. And note that validators here parallels the block producer role of miners in traditional proof-of-work networks like current Ethereum. The way we do this is through several incentive mechanisms, the main one of which is what we call the fee split mechanism. So for developers, we repurpose the EIP 1559 base fee in order to give Evmos developers a cut of the transaction fees that accrue towards the usage of the contracts they deploy, right? So on Ethereum, the EIP 1559 burns the base fee entirely, whereas on Evmos, the base fee is repurposed to award that base fee to both validators and developers, right? So as a developer, you can deploy your smart contract to Evmos, and based on the usage of that smart contract, have be able to reap a cut of that usage, right? So essentially, you're creating a cash flow for yourself by developing on Evmos, which can enable you to build out more sustainably without having to dilute ownership of the protocol by selling it to private interests as well. And again, this is kind of in the spirit of the community-driven approach that Evmos has so far embodied. In addition to that, we have 25% of the block rewards earmarked for what we call usage incentives. Now, usage incentives are different from the developer-focused fee split that I just talked about. Usage incentives are oriented towards users. For users who burn a large amount of gas on using smart contracts, they're able to get rebates on that usage through this mechanism right here. Contracts are whitelisted by governance, so the community essentially elects to vote on a contract that should be whitelisted for usage incentives, and users who interact with those smart contracts are able to make back some amount of Evmos tokens based on what's burned, or what they've burned. Essentially, rewarding the highest highest usage power users and enabling them to continue their journey of using Evmos dApps. So before I get to this, these two mechanisms combined sort of form the basis for the dApp store that I mentioned earlier. The developer mechanism specifically, the fee split mechanism, allows developers to earn a cut of the fees, much like the App Store that we're used to for when using the Apple or Android ecosystems, right? These cash flows can also be redirected towards funding public goods. So if the developer says, hey, I'm already generating cash flows through other means, but this specific developer incentive could be useful to fund the development of a bridge or to pay back the community pool, I can redirect my cash flow there. Now, the last issue that Evmos seeks to solve is the slow iteration. If we look at Ethereum's development timelines, we've seen timelines that take, they're on the order of magnitude of years, really. So topical here is EIP 1559, which was first proposed in 2019 and took 2 years after a few delays to really land back in 2021. Similarly, ETH 2.0, later renamed to the merge, has been in process, in the stage of implementation, testing, and rollout for many, many years, and we still haven't seen the merge land. It's slated for later this year, of course, but it's been 2 years away since, as far as I can remember. On the flip side, if you look at how much the Cosmos community has shipped to date, they've shipped features like IBC, superfluid staking, on-chain governance, CosmWasm, and fast finality proof of stake, to name a few. It's really quite amazing what the breakneck pace of the Cosmos ecosystem can really lead to. Future features that are planned for just later this year are things like threshold encryption, cross-chain NFTs, and interfluid staking. Now, recall, folks, that the Cosmos Hub has not been live for that long, and Osmosis really only launched as early as last year. Again, Juno launched earlier this year, I think, and Evmos also launched earlier this year. And already we've come a really long way as a community as far as all of the features that we've planned and shipped. Evmos specifically has shipped the features you see to the left, things that we didn't think would be possible as soon as they have been. So things like, bringing EVM smart contracts to Cosmos through Ethermint, but also, being able to support seamless integration of all the EVM applications that we're used to, core protocol incentives that I just talked about with alignment in the dApp store, Cosmos compatible ERC20 tokens, so bringing things like USDC to the Cosmos, as well as tokens like Uni, USDT, etc. And Ethereum to Cosmos bridging, making token transfers and arbitrary message calls possible between the two ecosystems. In the future, you'll see multi-coin fees, liquid staking, interchain accounts, and validator fairness also come to Cosmos, which will sort of complete the feature set that Evmos has planned. In addition to that, there's been a huge talk about shared security, and this sort of goes back to the aspect I mentioned in one of the first few slides. I talked about the trajectory of dApps being able to build on top of Evmos and then sort of spin off into their own L1s, similar to how DYDX has done it. So Evmos shared security, and now shared security has been a huge topic in the Cosmos community, especially recently, with the funding of Neutron from the Cosmos Hub. However, Evmos also has ambitions to incorporate shared security, and I think there was a great presentation yesterday too. So if you're watching the recording for this, I highly recommend you check out the shared security presentation from yesterday. But for dApps who deploy to Evmos, they're able to gain traction and sort of exit Evmos in the form of a consumer chain, a consumer Ethermint chain, with Evmos providing shared security. Eventually, if they so wish, they can bootstrap their own validator set, but the point here is that shared security smooths out the transition with having developers not need to bootstrap their own validator set from scratch. Evmos will provide that validator set, that infrastructure to build on top of, so that developers will only need to focus on their core business logic. One last thing on this point. My colleague yesterday shared some of her work on trailblazing the EVM Inter-Chain. With the proliferation of many EVMs in the Cosmos ecosystem, it'll be important for smart contracts amongst those to be able to talk to each other seamlessly. Building on top of a single EVM chain in the future will provide both developers and users with an abstracted interface. It won't matter what EVM chain they deploy to, and in fact, in the future, folks will be able to launch EVMs with their own custom precompiles. So, optimized for specific things like NFTs, NFT data storage, for example. Basically, these will all act as extensions to the same runtime, right? Again, focusing on the specific talk that my colleague gave yesterday, so on day 2 of HackATOM, I highly recommend you watch her presentation as well, titled Trailblazing the EVM Inter-Chain. She demonstrated an environment with 3 separate Evmos forks running, where you could deploy to any of these 3 Evmos forks and be able to talk to the other chain directly. You could build a multi-chain dApp without having to redeploy the exact same contracts on each of the other chains. dApps on, I guess one of the chains is called Ethos here. dApps on Ethos can talk to dApps on Logos seamlessly. If you are interested in learning more and getting started with this, please watch the presentation and navigate over to the URL you see on screen, github.com/laurel/demos, and that'll contain all of the instructions necessary for you to get started. Now, if you want to get started with general Evmos development, you can navigate over to the docs, docs.evmos.org, or just evmos.dev. You can also find the explorers and get help at the URLs on screen. Generally, something to point out is that the .org TLD will point you to mainnet explorers, whereas the .dev TLD will point you to testnet explorers. And this is the same for our RPC URLs as well, right? If you want to bridge over some liquidity to get started, Evmos supports a ton of bridges with a ton of connections to other EVM networks. Of course, I haven't mentioned it on the slide here, but you can always bridge liquidity over from other Cosmos chains. So Evmos supports IBC naturally. However, if you have tokens sitting on Ethereum, Moonbeam, Polygon, Gnosis chain, etc., you can bridge those tokens over to Evmos no problem with your bridge of choice. The canonical bridge that we like to use is Nomad in combination with Connext, but you're welcome to use any bridge that supports Evmos. As far as RPC endpoints and wallets, as I mentioned, Wallet Connect should work seamlessly out of the box, as well as MetaMask. So if you are coming from the Ethereum side, you can use either of those. If you're coming from the Cosmos side, you should be able to use Kepler, Cosmos Station Wallet, CipherD Wallet, etc. And that list keeps growing as more wallet teams add support. So I think next on the list is Leap Wallet. If you're used to using Leap, they'll be adding Evmos support fairly soon. In order to connect, you can go to the URL on screen, and we have a bunch of RPCs ready for you to use, both on the Cosmos side, so things like Tendermint, gRPC URLs, and on the Ethereum side. So you can also go to chainlist.org to connect your MetaMask directly to Chainlist RPC URLs. I'd also like to mention that in conjunction with this hackathon, HackATOM, we have the Evmos Momentum Hackathon, which is a month-long event hosted by the Web3 scholarship team. And so more details on that can be found on the dev post, or if you go to momentumhack.evmos.org, you can also find more information there. I think August is going to be the last day for the hackathon, and the prize pool there is 5 times HackATOM's prize pool for Evmos. So it's $500,000 worth of prizes. And again, of course, this event is hosted by was sponsored by the Evmos community pool. Big thanks to the Huobi Web3 scholarship team also for making it happen, making the proposal to the community pool in the first place. Now, I'll pause here for a minute or two. If you want to enter the raffle, we have this QR code on screen. You can also come find me after the talk, and I'm happy to share this with you as well. One last thing to mention here is that Evmos also has a grants program. So if you're not satisfied with the prize money you win at this event, as well as the Momentum Hackathon, which again is a month-long hackathon running from July to August, you're more than welcome to apply for an Evmos grant, and you can find that pinned to the top of our blog at evmos.blog. All right. Now, we also have a HackATOM raffle, so there's a lot of raffles going on. Again, if you don't get enough time to scan the QR code, come find me afterwards, and I'd be happy to share it with you. But enter the HackATOM raffle, enter the Evmos Momentum Hackathon raffle, 2 separate raffles, and double the chances to win things. All right, and that's it for this presentation. If you're a developer, I hope this has been compelling for you, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I also have a very, very short demo of how you can get started with developing on Evmos. For those of you who are beginners to developing on EVM-based environments, this will be useful for you to showcase how you can get started. And for those of you with more experience, this will be useful to sort of demonstrate parity with other, with how EVM tooling works on other chains. But I'll pause for let's say 2 minutes while folks ask questions, and I can also maybe have the previous raffle QR code up on screen for you. All right. Alrighty, okay. So I think that's it here. Switching gears a little bit. How's that coming out? Okay. So here we have Remix, which is a tool that most Ethereum developers have sort of gone through and used early on in their Solidity development journey. For those of you who are just getting started, you can always, learn Solidity by Googling it or browsing YouTube. There's a ton of tutorials at this point. One of the benefits of leveraging, an environment with so much existing support is that everything you learn in tutorials, guides, YouTube videos, etc., all of that is portable over to developing on Evmos as well. So I'm not going to do a tutorial on what Solidity is or how to write it. There's also, if you prefer other languages of choice, you have Viper, there's Huff, and my very own colleague Loredana, who again gave that talk yesterday, has developed her own language, Taylor, which you're welcome to check out as well. It'll be in that same repo by the Laurel. So what I have on screen here is Remix, which again is that tool that many developers use for quick iteration and development. And what it is it's an online IDE. So folks can use it for quickly deploying smart contracts to either a local simulated environment or a live network. And you'll see that I have the network pointed, the IDE pointed to my MetaMask, pointing to a chain with ID 9000. Now, chain with ID 9000 is in fact the Evmos testnet. All right, and again, if you are curious on how to add this to your MetaMask, you can do so by going over to chainlist.org. So we can try do it as well, turning this on and looking up Evmos. And here we go. This is Evmos testnet 9000. You can just connect your wallet and it'll add the network to your MetaMask. Of course, the Evmos mainnet is chain ID 9001. In any case, you have an option here to select many different providers. We're using the injected MetaMask provider, but if you're running like local tooling like Foundry, you can also plug Remix into Foundry. You can run a simulated in-browser environment as well. But yeah, so we're pointing to the live network. And what we're going to do is we have this Open Zeppelin contract, this ERC 721 implementation, which is basically a simple NFT smart contract. And we're going to deploy it to the network. But first, we need to seed our account with some tokens. And that's as easy as pulling some tokens from the testnet faucet. So I have the faucet account loaded up here, and I'm using Kepler here to demonstrate how easy it is to use any tooling that's out there to get what you want done. So we have the faucet with a high amount of tokens, of testnet tokens, and what we're going to do is we're going to no, why is it an invalid address? So we're going to actually do this. What's that? No, I guess the Explorer is displaying the address incorrectly here. But what we're going to do is we're going to send 500 tokens to our MetaMask account from the faucet. So we're not using the faucet to deploy any smart contracts. We are going to use the MetaMask account. But I'm using Kepler to send over these tokens in the first place. So we're just going to wait until the transaction is processed. And we should see the tokens show up. Oh, there you go. Show up on the demo account on MetaMask, right? So interoperable tooling. Now, let's see. So we have 500 Ether here. Well, it should be test Evmos. It's just that Remix is hard-coded to use Ether. And what we're going to do is we're going to deploy our ERC-721 smart contract, which again is an NFT smart contract. So we're passing in as input, so just to show you, the input here takes in a name and a symbol. And yeah, that's all we're going to do. It also, I guess, takes in a base token URI, but we're not going to use that. So we're passing in as a name HackATOM token and with the symbol hack, and we're going to deploy our smart contract. Just going to confirm that on MetaMask. And once the transaction has gone through, we'll be able to manipulate things like NFTs and sort of mint new ones and such. So our transaction has gone through here. Let's see if it shows up on here. No, I guess, yeah. I guess this is not the correct. Let's see if we can search up. Oop. Nope. Let's copy it back here. Ah, there you go. Okay. Not sure what the difference is there, but you can see here that, again, MintScan is usually a Cosmos-focused explorer. However, it's displaying Ethermint transactions here as well, right? So we can see two transactions have taken place. One is the transfer that I did. The other is the smart contract deployment on the testnet. And Remix is really nice because it lets you input, it lets you call any of the available public methods with any arbitrary input you'd like to pass in. So what we're going to be doing is we are going to mint an NFT. And again, we're going to just take this address here and pass it in as the owner of this new NFT. What we can do before that actually is we can query the smart contract to see if it's been set correctly. So we can query the name, and the name comes back to us as HackATOM token, of course. We can query the symbol, and the symbol is hack, and we can query the total supply. So how many NFTs have actually been minted here? And we see that the answer is 0, right? But let's change that. So we are going to mint a new NFT with the assigned owner being the demo MetaMask account. And so again, I'd need to confirm on MetaMask, pay for my transaction. And once it's confirmed, we'll be able to check the total supply once more, and that's changed to 1 now, signifying that the token has been minted. We can also check for who the owner is of a specific ID. And obviously the first NFT minted will have an ID of 0 since it's 0 indexed. And that should give us back my address, which matches up to the demo address, D19B, D19B. And yeah, that's how you can get started developing on Evmos. It's as simple as doing what you would do on Ethereum. And if you're at this point of, if you're a Cosmos developer and looking to start, then feel free to come ask me questions or look up any guide that focuses on Ethereum development, and it'll be much the same. Thank you very much, and that's it for me.